of what they need to do if they need to reach out to us. But kind of the historical piece, 220 has been operating for 7 years. April, actually, in 2 days will be 7 years. So it's incorporated in Florida. It is a peer program, and I am not the founder. There were two veterans that founded 220. Basically, I don't know, it was April 2021, I went through the training because my fire chief asked me to. And I've been very vocal about it. I was very adamant I was not going to do it. I had enough things to do. But because I have that clinical background, and being in the volunteer fire department in my county since 2008, I'm the one who's always called. When something happens in the fire department or with our fire department member families, I'm the one who's called. So my past fire chief, Bill, says, "Hey, I need you to take this training." And then for like 3 weeks, I kept saying, "Nope, dude, I am busy. I got enough going on." And it's funny how God works, because I did take the training, and I've also been very vocal about it. The training, or as part of the training, you're actually going through the process. And I was a reserve deputy for 5 years before becoming what my grandkids called the kid police in Giles County. And ultimately, anything that happened with a child going to court, be it a status offense or abuse, human trafficking, any of those, sex trafficking, all those things came through me. I kind of filtered all that stuff for our judge. And I said, no, but I really was very busy with that, by the way. And so I did agree to go through the training just to shut him up. And I've told him that many times. I love him, but just to shut him up, get him off my back. But there were 2 calls that I had at the sheriff's department, and there were 3 calls that I had at the fire department that were very problematic for me, to the point that I was on Ambien. And when I went through the training, I felt an immediate shift. And so if you haven't been through the process, you really wouldn't understand what we're talking about. But the majority of the time, there's just this immediate shift. And so it was funny because the training was online, and my husband was in the other room, and I walk out, we broke for lunch, and again, that immediate shift had already happened. And he said, "I thought you were in training." And I said, "I am." And he said, "You look different." And I'm thinking, dude, I haven't left the house. I am in training. He said, "I think you've had 3 glasses of Jack and Coke, Pam." And I'm going, "What?" I have not. He said, "Don't tell me you're drinking during that class." But I explained to him, as part of that training, that I had to go through the process. And he said, "I can just see something totally different about you." That was the first night that I went to sleep without Ambien. I haven't been on it since. Um, for those that don't know, my husband served 26 years. He was in Desert Storm. He was by the burn pits and ended up getting cancer, and he passed away July 2023. And the last thing that he said before he went into that deep sleep was, let me back up just a tad bit. So he had actually started going with me when I was having events for 220. So 220 prior leadership had been trying to get me to come on for 8 months, and I kept saying, "No, I'll have to pray about that." And I said, I'm busy. I'll just kind of do stuff in the background. And what I was doing in the background was getting research set up for Arizona, for 220 through Arizona State University, because having that clinical piece, I knew in order to get 220 moving and get that peer reviewed data, research done, it had to be from an independent university or someone that does research. And Arizona State University agreed to do that. I was doing all that stuff behind the scenes because I believed in it that much. At some point, I finally agreed and came on as the executive director. So my husband would go with me through, to the different events. And there was one event that he went with me. It was in Westgate in Florida. And Nick, who's, one of the founders, actively involved as far as the training and stuff and coaching, he actually worked with Jerome just because he had his own demons from his deployment to Desert Storm. And so when he knew that I mean, he would know my schedule, and he said, I know you've got 3 events. And this was when he was on that palliative care that started to roll over to hospice. And leadership, like the board members, was going to take care of those events. And I said, no. I said, I'm not going, I'm staying here. And he was very adamant. He instilled in me from day one, you never leave anyone behind. And that was his big thing, is to leave nobody behind. And I said, those events will be fine. They'll carry on without me. And he said, no, you're going. And I told him, and I've told many people this. I told him, I said, so help me, if you die while I'm gone, I'm going to go over to the funeral home and tell Steve Pierce, I'm going to kick your butt. I said, don't do that to me. And he said, I won't. And he didn't. So I went to those 3 events. And then it was at that piece where, he rolled over into hospice. And the last thing that he said was, he said, I love you. And he said, Pam, whatever you do, make sure you don't leave anyone behind. And that was the last thing he said before he went into that deep sleep. And that's what I do. I am making sure I leave nobody behind. One, just to keep his memory alive, but because that's what we're supposed to do in the military community. That's what we do as a family. So, in saying that, you know, he was so supportive with 220. He was supportive in the mission of 220. And it was kind of funny because the last 3 years of his life, he had no trauma because Nick worked with him when we were at Westgate. So he and Nick became really good friends. Um, he actually called Nick the Master Jedi dude. It was funny. So, because he kind of Jedi'd him. And if you've ever been through the process, and there's many of you on here that know that a lot of times that's what I kind of do is, when someone's kind of reluctant, I'll just Jedi them. And then by the time we're done, they're going, what did you just do to me? Um, got you healed from that trauma. So the trauma resiliency protocol, basically, a lot of people have heard of EMDR. EMDR falls under the neurological linguistic programming. Okay. The difference is 220's processes fall under the NLP model. Up to 18 months for EMDR to work, and you're telling that stuff over, and over because you're having to relive it they're wanting you to become desensitized to it. With 220, the average number of sessions is between 2 to 4. The other piece to that, it's 2 to 4 sessions, and you're not allowed to talk about the content. I can make you trigger without you telling me any content. So that's 2 reasons. One, that protects my mission clients, okay, but then that protects my peer coaches that I'm very protective of. So I'm not just protective of the mission clients, I'm protective of my peer coaches. And there's something called vicarious trauma. And what vicarious trauma is that trauma didn't directly happen to you, indirectly by hearing that information. And I think about a lot of the licensed mental health providers who are hearing that over and over and over, and they're getting vicarious trauma from working with those that suffer from trauma. The other piece to that is I do not believe that post-traumatic stress is a disorder. It is not. It's actually an injury, and it's more neurological, which again falls under the NLP, but it's more neurological, where when you experience a traumatic event, it's stuck in the amygdala. And until we can get you to get that process to get moved over from the amygdala, because that amygdala is where you have that fight or flight and freeze response. That's why you're always triggering smells, sights, sounds, whatever that may be, is because that trauma is stuck in the amygdala. So in order to go through the process and us to get it moved over to where it needs to be, so you have that sleep and it's processed in the hippocampus and you're moving right on along and you're no longer in that triggering mode because those events have been processed. So one of the things that I tell is that content never changes. Okay, the content is there. What happens is, if you think about an event that you experienced that was traumatic and you're having those visceral reactions like the, fight or flight or the freeze reactions to an event or to certain stimuli related to making you think of that event. When you're able to get that processed, when you think of that event, because it then becomes neutral. So you're not having those visual responses. You're not in that fight or flight or freeze mode. And that's the difference with what we do compared to EMDR. Um, the other piece of that is, we're going to get you in a safe place before, we're going to get you in a safe place after whatever those events are. Um, but you're not going to talk about it. Like I said before, it's not talk therapy. The big goal is to get that rapport. And we always tell our mission clients, Trisha, which is our social worker, she will tell them, and if I'm taking the call, I'll let them know, if you don't feel like you have connected with that coach, let us know. We will reassign you. It has absolutely nothing to do with us at 220. It strictly has to do with making sure that you're paired with that right coach. Um, the coaches are trained specifically in the process. They're not allowed to deviate from that process. I was talking about Arizona State University. So the first study was actually published August of last year. And right now we have two other studies that Arizona State University has in peer review. And then we've got three other studies we're working on this year. So all of that in relation to the traumatic piece, it's not talk therapy. It's really getting you to a place where you're safe before and after that event. And then the EMP is the emotions management process, and that's going to be negative emotions such as fear, anger, terror, helplessness, guilt. We get a lot of survivor guilt with especially with our military who have been deployed. And it's really getting those, again, that falls under the NLP world, but that gets it so that you're not having those negative reactions to those negative emotions. Okay. Has anybody got any questions so far? Because that's a lot, but that kind of gives you the highlight. But any questions that you have so far? The other piece to that, so when I mentioned mission clients are going to be armed forces, any branch that does include the Guard. Does not matter if you were deployed or not. And the trauma does not mean you have to get it from deployment. Trauma is trauma. I don't care. Trauma is trauma. So you don't have to come to us because it's a deployment trauma. It can be childhood trauma. I don't care. We're gonna heal it. So any branch of the armed forces, it's going to be first responders. First responders for us are going to be the LEOs, the fire. It's going to be EMT, paramedics, 911 dispatchers, and corrections. Spouses, minor children living in the home, and Gold Star family are all covered at no cost. So there's no cost to you. We don't report to the VA. If you're a first responder, we do not report to your employer. We're not reporting. I get asked a lot of the times, well, I have a disability rating. Okay, keep it. As far as I'm concerned, you've earned whatever that percentage rate is. I don't want you messing with it. You don't have to tell the VA nothing because I'm not telling them nothing. You earned that, keep that. That's how I see about that. All we want is to have you healed. The other piece to that is like within the first responder role, and I know this personally just because of being in that first responder role. So you have these EAPs, right? Okay. So supposedly with the EAP, my chief or my sheriff isn't going to know that I'm going through those EAP programs. But what happens somehow miraculously that gets back to your chief or gets back to your sheriff or whoever because it's not 100% confidential. They can tell you it is. It's not. I promise you, we're not going to report to your employer. It's not going to happen. So in saying that, looking at it from the peer phase, I'm going to take it from the clinical piece, and then I'm going to take it from being a peer as far as a first responder. Within the clinical model, the goal is to always get that rapport with your client. Not any different with what we do with, working with our mission clients. The difference is it is very difficult for veterans, first responders to open up or talk to someone who don't get it. I mean, they just don't get it. Yes, you can have that rapport to a certain level, but in order for them to get the ability to feel that they can trust somebody, a lot of the times in the clinical world, it's very difficult because what is the main goal for our armed forces and first responders? Serve and protect. So if I'm telling you my junk, then I'm not serving and protecting you. That's an oath that we take. Okay. Within the clinical world, I was fortunate because of all the work that I did in my county. They would come to me anyways when I did have my counseling practice because they knew I wasn't going to report it. But they also knew my husband was a veteran, and being a first responder and just having another tool under my belt with the clinical piece, they felt safe within that realm. So when someone calls us and, they may call me directly, they may go to the website or call the 800 number, whatever, we're going to let them know. You have to be able to feel that you can trust that peer. And they're not going to take it personal if you feel like you can't connect with them. You just need to let Trisha know, let me know, let the coach know, because they're not going to take it personal. That's not what we do. Um, okay, great. You're not feeling like you've connected with that coach. I'm going to give you somebody else. And that's all there is to that. When you're looking at getting that rapport, going back to the clinical piece, one of the reasons that so many mental health professionals have that hard time in establishing that rapport is because they can't connect. They may connect in certain areas outside of the role of the armed forces or first responder. But with a armed force member and or first responder, again, you take that oath, you're going to serve and protect. So you feel like if you open up and kind of verbiage all that stuff to them, you're not protecting them. Therefore, they're holding back. That's why so many won't go to the mental health field. That's why so many will not go to the VA. What happens within the VA? They want you to talk about it over and over and over. Well, they don't want to talk about that stuff. That's the other piece. Is so many do not want to talk about that content, trying their best to forget it. Like, I don't want it in my head, and whatever means that they use, a lot of the times that means self-medicating, alcohol and drugs. Then that kind of leads down to the rabbit hole of possibly, having criminal charges, DUIs or whatever. When you're looking at it from that point, those that don't go to the VA, the majority of those that have died by suicide have not stepped foot in the VA. Those that have gone to the VA and that died by suicide, a lot of those actually will die at the VA. And that's to make a statement. Why, why, why is it so difficult for the VA administration to see and understand what you're doing is not working? 6 years ago, 7 years ago, you were saying it was 22 a day. That was the average. What people don't know is that 22 reflects only the male population in the military. That does not reflect women veterans that die by suicide. That does not reflect those who have actually died from an overdose. That's not counted as suicide. The other piece of that is you have the medical examiner. So every county has a medical examiner, and especially in the rural areas, what happens is everybody knows everybody. And if somebody has a life insurance policy and you die by suicide, they know that family's not going to get that life insurance policy. So then it's deemed as accidental when clearly it was suicide. So when you're looking at all of those variables, and then in 2025, they're still saying 22 a day, that's not accurate. To me, the 22 average 7 years ago was not accurate because it does not incorporate all variables. Reality wise, there's actually more along the 40 to 44 a day that die by suicide from the military and first responder community. That's more realistic. So what we're going to do about, to change it? I've done everything I can. I continue to march down that path to get the VA to understand.
Pam, excuse me a second. Do you know what the number of women attempting suicide is? Approximately?
Every state is going to be different. I know in Tennessee, the number has increased with the women, and the method of means of dying by suicide has radically changed. There's more women that's dying by gunshot wound now.
Mhm.
than it is. Years ago it was more from hanging. Now it's more gunshot wound. But you can actually go to it, which it's a year off, so it takes film. So we're looking now at the 2023 data, but the number of women have actually increased over the few years that die by suicide.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Has anybody got any questions or comments so far? You're making me do a lot of talking. I want you to open it up and ask questions, you know, comments.
I just feel like I'm busy learning.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that for the VA in particular, their main focus on this issue is the talk and talk therapy. And my husband and I've both gone through first responder training for peer support, and that's what they teach too. And I know I have PTS, and his big thing for me is I can't get on a main road in our town, and it's the road that you have to go on in order to get from one place to another. I can't do it, especially if it's raining. And my husband, with all of his training, says, well, that's the only way you're going to get past this is by getting out there and getting on that road. And I went, well, I guess I won't get past it then, because it doesn't help me any. So I think it's interesting that that still seems to be the main focus.
Yeah, but so first off, I'm going to say with this, you need to be letting me know so I can get Trisha set you up with a pre-assessment. So everyone goes through a pre-assessment. That is a trauma screen, depression screen, and an anxiety screen. It's typical clinical tools that's used, but it's to only give us basically that baseline. So even then, when you're doing the pre-assessment, you're not talking about the content. And I have coaches, I've even told some of them, in the past when mission clients try, because they're so used to that talk therapy, they're going, well, but stop them. It's just like, I can make you trigger without you telling me a word. That protects you, but that protects them as well. And so I can understand one from his mindset. He's a male, and we all know that men operate on one side of the brain, women operate on a totally different side of the brain. That's just how we are wired. But in saying that, all you have to do is say, Pam, I want to go through the process. It's not going to cost you anything. Trisha will get a time set up with you to do the pre-assessment and get you set up with a coach. And then after if he says anything, when you get it to where you're able to drive on that road, you can say it was not what you said. So then you can say, now you need to go through the process.
I love it.
But the big piece, again, it's about 2 to 4 sessions. So how, and I get asked this, how does that look? Okay. So say someone emails us, or they're, because you can go into the website and submit a contact form. It comes directly to me. It comes directly to Trish. And then we are going to work around your time. In other words, Trish is going to say, hey, Nancy, she's going to say, what time zone are you? Because she's Eastern time. We don't want to call someone in California at 8 o'clock our time when it's 6 o'clock their time. That wouldn't be too good, especially in the morning time. But she's going to work with your schedule. She's going to say, when are you available? She's going to do the pre-assessment. It takes about 10-15 minutes at the most. It's a rating scale. So, the trauma screen 0 to 4, 0 doesn't bother you, 4 it's extremely bothersome in relation to the symptoms. After she gets the pre-assessment done, she automatically connects you with the coach. So we don't set the coach's schedules, because you know your schedule, but they know their schedule as well. So what happens is she connects you with your coach. You and your coach set up the time, and then y'all work and run through the process. It may take 2 sessions. It may take 3 sessions. It doesn't matter. It's however it's going to take. And then once you're done, we do that same screening, the trauma screen, depression screen, and the anxiety screen. And that's the post assessment. So when you see someone who scores, 80 is the highest you can go on a trauma screen for the PCL5, So when you see someone who has actually scored 60, 70, and even 80, and after they've gone through the process, they're 10 and below, that's huge. That's significantly different. So clinically, if you have a 10-point reduction in any of those, you know, clinical realms, that's clinically significant. But what we see is 40, 50, and 60-point reductions. And that's what Arizona State University is studying, that along with the process.
Fascinating. We'd love to hear from some of the rest of you if you have any thoughts, have any ideas, questions.
Hi, I'm Karen. I'm a peer coach with 22-0, but I started the process a couple years ago. Husband was Marine and then Army for 19 years, med boarded. And we heard about you guys, about 22-0 from our chiropractor. And then life unraveled after retirement. I think when you go 100 mile an hour to zero, I think everything just catches up. And we were at rock bottom. I mean, there was no other way, but we were done. So I called Trisha, and I was very suspicious of anyone because I was very protective of him, even though we were struggling big time. And just the response was very, very quick. And that's one thing I do love about 22-0. You're just in that mindset of, well, I'll probably hear something in a couple months. Maybe I can get an appointment. But it was within a day, and then, oh, you have an appointment next week. What? Wow. Okay. So often when people are in that position to want to get help, knowing that they can get it help really quickly, they're like, oh, okay. So we almost don't give them a chance to back out because we know it took a lot for them to make that call. And as a spouse, and this is the other thing I love about 22-0, it's the whole family. As a spouse, it was like, well, you can get help. I've got to go pay someone $50 an hour because of your PTS, and we're in this mess because of life's just. So I think having that support from someone who loved the family and wanted to see the family healed. There was that fear that it will work for everyone else, but not me. It says on our website over 10,000. And, even recently when I got some work done, I was like, oh, it really does work, because we get in that mindset. It's like, it's going to work for everyone else, but you don't know my stuff. And I think I can outsmart this. Well, no, the brain is designed to heal. So some other things that happened is then I got involved, and then life took a different direction. I'm in school now with my bachelor's in psychology with a focus in military resilience because I wanted to go in. We can't get into some of these places without credentials, so this is why having the credentials and I say the expensive receipt on the wall, but this just really does bring freedom to people. I've seen it. I love working with people, and it's been a game changer. And it's such a gentle process. So yeah, it's been good. So that's my experience as a spouse, the spouse too, because she's the watcher. She's the one that's trying to soothe and damage control and bring down. And then she's got her own trauma, or he's got his own trauma too. So, and that's just a really good part of the piece. So yeah, love it.
Yeah, I think it's great that there's so many times that I'm talking to women and they say, I've been trying to get into the VA or the vet center, and the appointments are 6 and 8 months out. And yeah, I have no idea how I'm going to hold on that long. And to say, well, listen, there's somebody that can help you, in the next week or two, give them a call. And you see the anxiety just leave their faces, and it's like, oh, you mean there really is help out there? And I think that's wonderful. I haven't been able to connect anyone with you guys yet, but I'm working on it.
So if I may, I'm also a resiliency coach with 22-0, and I've been with them for 3 years now. Um, there's a couple things that I really, really enjoy, and Dr. Arnell touched upon the fact that we're peer coaches. We get it. And I mean, knowing that you can actually work with somebody, it's completely confidential. It's done through, you know, the different like Zoom or the HIPAA compliant video conferencing app that we use for sessions. Nobody has to know, especially, I mean, I'm retired law enforcement. The last thing you want your chief to know is that you're struggling. Ultimately, they're going to put you out on administrative leave. And that's a huge fear. So knowing that an individual that is struggling can reach out for help and get the help they need. I mean, we get assigned a client and we're calling, I mean, within 24 hours, even sooner. The clients that are assigned to me, I usually call them within that day, not even 3 hours later after Trish has obtained their information. So it is, and the reaction is like, wow, that was quick. Yeah. And it's about working with their schedule, like Dr. Arnell said, and then not having to get triggered, not having to go into the dialogue and sharing all that stuff. And the looks on their faces after running them through specifically the trauma resiliency protocol, it's really, really touching when they're like, wow, what did you just do to me? We're not meant to suffer. Like Karen said, we're not meant to suffer. And
Okay,
we can feel.
I have a question about all of that. How do you connect with someone that doesn't realize or doesn't allow themselves to realize that they need help?
Well, first of all, like Karen said, we get in touch with them rather quickly because I mean they wouldn't be reaching out if they didn't need the help. The only
They may
ones
not
that
be reaching out. Excuse me, but my question is, you're talking to someone. I go to a lot of expos and I talk to someone, and a lot of the women that I work with say, I didn't realize for 20 years after I was out of the military that I actually had PTS or MST. And I've lived all this time with all of these issues, but I didn't know I had them. So they haven't reached out. They're sitting there talking to me. What can I do to say without saying, you got issues, you got to go talk to 22-0? What do I say to them that gently leads them in that direction?
So one of the things, if you pick up on irregular sleep patterns, behavioral things that if they're getting startled rather easily over different situations, like if their phone pings and they're like, oh, different behaviors, like even if they're sharing eating patterns that don't sound normal, oversleeping, signs of depression, constantly going towards the negative, thinking the worst. Different thing, and then even like self-ridicule, self-judgment, not feeling a part of that isolation, or even picking up on one of the things like if they're thinking about contemplating suicide and stuff, they're literally like giving things away, not talking about the future. These are different things like, I don't care anymore. I don't really care. So different things if you pick up on the language, the body language, like I said, if they're getting like a little triggered, if their phone goes off, if they hear something and they're like, what was that? And maybe ask a couple of questions. Hey, what happened to you there? Is everything okay? Or
How do I then say to them?
just get curious.
No, I mean, if I see the things that you're talking about and I know they need to go, I don't want to just say to them, "Look, you need help."
No,
How?
and it just, you know, I, did you, if they served, Do you feel like you're struggling a little with that? Even asking them, just getting curious with compassion, because there's no judgment in curiosity either.
Right.
I actually know that I know of a nonprofit that can actually help you. And obviously, if they're first responder or a vet or fit into the protocol that Dr. Arnell stated, I know of an agency that would be able to work with you if you're interested.
Nancy, one of the things that I'll ask, because so the 800 number on the website comes into me, and it's funny because every time that the phone rings, if I'm not in a meeting, then I'm going to answer it. And then they're just dumbfounded because I'm not a computer and I'm a real person. And they're going, "Did you just say doctor?" I get that all the time, but yes, this is Dr. Arnell. So when they call in and it's at that level, they need more of that clinical background, that's why they're getting me. But when they, and I can't tell you the number of times that I've had people say, "Well, my wife said," or "My husband said," but I don't think I have a problem. Okay, well, what would it look like for your husband or your wife or friend or partner to stop saying you need help? Well, that would be amazing. Okay, well, then let us help you do that. So you frame that. When you're talking to these individuals, be it first responder and or, vets, just say, "Hey, what would your day look like if you were able to get up and you didn't have to carry that trauma?" It'd be amazing. I have the perfect place for you to go. And you don't even have to go anywhere. You can stay at home.
That's what I'm looking for, is that kind of a comment. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, appreciate that. We are getting close to the time to wrap this up. Does anybody have any final questions or comments that they'd like to?
And hey, Nancy, something you may want to consider, especially because I know you're out and about in meetings and events like I do. Once you go through the process and you have those individuals that come up to you and they're going, you can share that with them and say, "Look, I was reluctant, I was hesitant, but I did it, and you're going to be amazed. Just trust me." Because when they're coming to you, you're already building that rapport with them. You're already getting that connection with them. And there are more that actually trust you more than what you realize. And by you being that example for them, "Hey, I went through it. If I can do it, anybody can."
Yeah, it was amazing. I went to a vendors expo last week, and thanks to Sandy, I shifted focus a little bit on, everybody had their tables lined up and all of that. Well, I moved mine kind of sideways a little bit. I have a service dog, and I had his little pillow bed down beside me, and I put chairs out. And my husband walked around and was talking with the dog, and he's talking to everybody, and he's sending people over my way, and they're coming over to talk, just to see what I do. And I said,
Uh-huh.
"You want to have a seat? Come on, sit down, talk to me." You cannot imagine the number of people that just women, because that's
Yeah.
what we work with, are women. But, it's just the stories. And it was just like, oh, thank you. There's someone that's actually listening to me.
Yeah.
And so I know I'm getting ready to do another couple of expos in the next couple of weeks. So I know how I'm going to set up my tables
There you
because
go.
that's what I want. Is I want them to know, that there are people like you out there and us, because we provide resources. And that's a perfect segue into telling you just a little bit, if you don't mind my taking a few minutes, just to tell you a little bit about what Invisible Warriors does. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we work specifically with women, both prior and active duty military. We haven't expanded into the first responders yet. That will be next. But so we started out just supporting through resources and things like that, supporting the PTS and the MST. But since we've expanded, because we've heard so many of these women say, I just want to be valued. I want to be seen. I want people to know that when I park in a military spot at the Home Depot, that they don't run up and pound on my windows and screaming at me because it's not my husband. I'm a veteran too. And so we've expanded what we do to allow for all military women to be able to connect with others and share their experiences, good, bad, and whatever. We provide an environment where they can feel seen and valued, and we have peer support groups. We have resources like working with 220, and we do community building activities, and we empower them to reclaim their sense of importance and belonging. For instance, we do this quarterly. Weekly, we have a program called Open Door that is an online Zoom where the women can just come in for an hour and talk about anything and just be able to share what's going on for them. Whether it's, I haven't been out of my house for a month and I'm going stir crazy, or, I've got real problems with the VA. Does anyone know how I can increase my level of disability? They can talk about anything they want to talk. And it is run by a female veteran. And so she can answer their questions and be a part of their conversations. So we do that. We have a weekly newsletter that gives all kinds of tips and strategies that people can learn about. We're getting ready to have a major gala on June 12th. 1948, President Truman created the Women Armed Forces Integration Act, which is what actually brought the WACs and the WAVES into the military. So it's been a legal endeavor since 1948, and it is known as Women Veterans Recognition Day. It is a holiday, but only 20 states actually have acknowledged it and actually support it. As of this year, June 12th, Alabama will now be the 21st state, because we got our governor to create a proclamation saying, moving forward, Alabama will celebrate Women Veterans Recognition Day every year on June 12th, and we're having a big party. So if any of you are near enough to Huntsville to come on down, we'd love to have you. We have a Major General female who's going to be talking. We're putting together, hopefully, a video of women from different eras of the military, just talking about who they are and their experiences. So we're trying to make the community realize that women are an important and serious part of the military, and it's not just the men. So if you are veterans, we would love to have you be a part of our community as well. Everything we try to do, most everything free. The money that we collect from this gala is going to, and I'm hoping that Dr. Arnell will come and spend a little bit of time with us at our retreat. We're going to have a retreat in September. I just found the location yesterday. I'm so excited. Yay. And we're going to have therapists there. We're going to have a JAG lawyer there. We're going to spend time just in camaraderie, and we're going to give everybody journals that they can sit and write about if they feel like that. We're going to do art classes. We're going to roast s'mores. We're going to go kayaking, for week-long retreats. It's all free. Invisible Warriors is paying for that if we can get the money together, and because we really believe that it should not be tied into what somebody can afford. We need to be able to support you. So it's all free. And we would love to invite you to be a part of our organization as well. So
where did you find the location? Where's it going to be?
It's going to be in Brownsboro. Do you know where that is? It's only about 20 miles from the base. So I don't know where it is. I have to go out. It's right on the Flint River. So going down towards Gunnersville, I think.
Huh. Do you have the actual dates yet?
We're hoping, we don't, but we're hoping it's going to be the second or the third week of September.
Okay.
So And it's like $40,000. So we need to get as much financial support as we possibly can in order to do this. Sandy, were you going to say something?
I was just going to note that's why we're running the gala, and that's why we've been applying for every grant that comes across our desk, because it's very important to us that money not be an obstacle to women's healing at this MST retreat. We are familiar with other organizations that are running retreats, but the women have to pay. And sometimes they are just not in a position where there's enough money even to pay for their own transportation.
Right.
So our objective is to raise enough funds to remove that obstacle. Then it's just a decision. Do I want to get there?
Right.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Because I was going to ask if you were looking at different grants to try and get secured foundations and grants to help.
We're trying. We just got awarded one, but we have no idea. This is crazy. I've never heard of this before. We have no idea how much we're getting, and we won't know. They're having a big gala themselves, and they're not going to know how much they're giving us until after they've had their gala. And their gala is not until after our event. So it's going to be a little crazy trying to figure this all out. But
if whatever we earn from that might have to be put forward to 2026, it's going to be tight. They don't give funds to the grantees until they see how much they've raised at each charity ball. So as Nancy said, that's we're sitting in a weird place because we have no idea how much they will raise this year. But whatever it is, we'll go towards that.
Usually give anywhere from 10 to 20,000.
Well, four you said is what the one grantee
Four was, one person got 4,000, but
so it could be as low as that, or it could be as much as 10. And
yeah, so we're just got
we've got other grants out there we haven't heard back from yet, and we're still looking for more.
Yeah.
Have you tried? Hey, Sandy, have you tried Walmart, the Spark?
I just applied for that a couple of weeks ago. Haven't heard anything back yet.
Okay.
Yeah, but anything that you hear, Pam, please feel free to send our way. We're kind of getting this application process down. We've been hoping for a volunteer who would take on doing grants for us, but so far that person has not stepped up to us and said, I will do this. We had one who volunteered and then never heard back from her again. So I don't know.
Oh, wow.
We have a number of those. We don't know why.
When they realize they have to do work and not just put their name on a piece of paper, then they leave.
Some of them.
I can understand that though. I've experienced some stuff like that. So
I'll bet.
Yeah.
It happens in every nonprofit.
But when you see these women, regardless of what it is, like I said, just the fact that there was somebody there to listen to them last week and say, sit, please talk to me. They came over and they loved on Warrior, the dog. And, it's amazing when it's even a little bit. So I imagine the kind of reactions that you all get when you are actually able to help someone alleviate the trauma and that all. I can just imagine what it must feel like for both of them and you, because you're supporting them so much, and I want us to get to that point.
You will.
I think we need to promote Warrior coming to the military meetups, Nancy. That just struck me.
That's a good idea.
Come meet Warrior at the meetup, and maybe that would encourage some who've been a little reluctant to just come and sit with him.
Yeah, it's like what you were saying earlier, is that they don't want to talk about these things. So if you say, we're having a meetup for military women with PTS and MST, nobody comes. So we've actually started not only doing them in person, but we've started bringing them in on Zoom so that they don't have to leave their home if they want to. They don't have to talk. They can just keep their screens off and listen if that's what they want to. But it's really difficult to get them to acknowledge the fact that they're going through these struggles. And we want them to know that they don't have to do it alone. that there are organizations like both of ours out there that are able to support and help them to live thriving lives again instead of, the struggles that they're going through. So
One of the things that I would recommend is, instead of saying it, to the level of come join us if you have trauma,
Yeah.
or you've been a victim, I wouldn't use it that way. What I would do is come in and join in on the camaraderie.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
what we're now doing. Yeah.
Yeah, because the ones, and to them, a lot of people that have trauma, because they've had it for so long, they don't realize they have it because they've had it for so long. So to them, that's normal, or that is what has become normal. So when you're offering or saying, XYZ, to them, that doesn't include them.
Yeah.
That's
Because,
other people.
yeah, that's not
Well,
me.
and one of our biggest volunteers that we do have who does things for us has been out of the service for 20 years. And she came to the first meetup and she said, I didn't realize until just now. I was just here to help you. I didn't realize until just now. I have some of these issues, and so you're absolutely right. And she'd been out for 20 years and didn't realize she had it. So, well, ladies, it is noon. If you are interested in looking at our website just to see what we do, it is https://invisiblewarriors.org.
Or just look in the chat.
Yeah, I knew Sandy would do that for me.
We're a team.
That's right. So thank you for coming. Thank you, Pam, for the really interesting conversation. I appreciate you so much. And I'm sure we will all be talking again. All right. Until next time, have a wonderful week, y'all.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.